operational. So there are those smelters and plants that if you switch them off, it is hugely costly to restart, or it is also technically dangerous to do so. Those will be supported with a reduced production to keep them going. In order to contain the spread of COVID-19, travel will be restricted in line with the regulations to be outlined by the Minister of Cooperative Governments and Traditional Affairs. Mineral Council has committed to avail its health infrastructure, facilities and staff during the lockdown to support government efforts. In other words, in the health services, in the mines, if there is pressure to actually provide and avail beds, those will be availed. Or in the case of quarantining facilities and there are empty hostels that can be cleaned quickly and be used to be used for quarantine, those will be availed. That is the commitment that has been made. On energy, the following activities are among those which will be considered an essential service: the production and distribution of petroleum products, including fuel, paraffin, liquefied petroleum gas. This entails shipping, manufacturing, terminal distribution, and retail. In the case of petroleum products, imports will be scaled back for the duration of lockdown, as there will be excess capacity. Our calculation is that because demand will have declined, therefore there will be no pressure to import additional products. Regulatory oversight on nuclear facilities, as well as nuclear safeguard inspections, those will continue. Production and supply of nuclear medicine and chemical used at refineries, those will be continued to be produced. Safari 1 research reactor and support technical services will continue. Engagement are ongoing between the sectors and the relevant government departments and state-owned entities. Will continue to provide updates as the situation unfolds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. As we speak, we are linked to Cape Town. We are linked to many hundreds of community radio stations in our country, so that these messages and information that we are conveying is also conveyed to all our people in various areas of our country through our community radio stations. I will now request Minister of Public Service and Administration, Minister Kono, to come and speak to us on what we'll be doing in that area.
Good afternoon to everyone here, and my special good afternoon to the director of these proceedings, Velas, Minister, and the Presidency. My colleagues, Minister Mantashe has just addressed you, Minister Ndabeni Abrahams, and Minister Mteto Nyambos. We appreciate this opportunity to talk to you and via you talk to the public about what we are saying in relation to our portfolios, and I'm specifically focusing on public servants and public service generally. Firstly, to state that the main duty of public service is twofold. Firstly, it is to deal with conditions, regulations, and rules of employment, including application of the relevant acts and sections of the Constitution with regard to employment of public servants, the conditions under which they work, and the conditions under which they exit public service as public servants. So following the declaration of the state of national disaster by the President of the Republic, the first thing we did was to issue circular number 7 to outline and guide directors general, HODs, and all managers and public servants in government with regard to the provisions of safety in the workplace. We were necessarily at that time focusing on the tools and other measures that they needed to take in order to contain this in the workplace. And we did this in line with the applicable Act 1994 of safety environment in the public service. But also it needed urgent attention and upgraded attention and focus after the outbreak of coronavirus and steps that have been taken by the President of the Republic. And shortly after the disaster was then declared, we have reissued another circular which will be publicized. We've just signed it, which is an additional guide based on the steps that have been taken of late in relation to the lockdown. And in this regard, we are focusing on guiding DGs and HODs, one, to identify minimal, critical, and essential services within their areas of responsibility. This means that each and every HOD at national level, at provincial level as well, they have duty from yesterday to ensure that at least they publicize what they consider to be minimal, critical, and essential services. Once they do that, they then have to identify staff that need to continue rendering such services to ensure, in line with the fact that there's no shutdown of government necessarily, there has to be continued rendering of those services that are regarded as essential and critical. Over and above identifying such staff in government, they then have to take additional measures, how they will get to work and how they will take shifts where it is necessary and possible to do so, and how their safety will be ensured in their places of work. Those are the main things that are necessary. Identifying critical and essential work in each department, and identifying staff to render those services, but then to ensure that you take measures that will ensure that they themselves are able to get to work safely, and that while they are at work, they are then looked after for their own safety. In addition to this, it is important also that DGs and HODs identify supportive staff for those core staff members that render those essential services. It is not possible for core staff rendering essential services and so identified to render such services on their own without support staff. They therefore have to do so and also give support as identified above. As said, we've just signed this and we'll publicize that across the board. While doing this, we need to take this opportunity and say to public servants, we are quite aware about, or quite aware of their own anxiety and the general feeling and emotions that they are going through while required to render these essential services. We are also cautious and conscious of the fact that there may be arguments and debate about us on something that would border on arguments of treating staff unfairly, in the sense that there are those who are going to remain at work and those who will be required to work from home. And we want to say, firstly, in this regard, we've made sure that we work with the unions and will continue to do so. This is not a once-off thing, because this is an occurrence that has just happened without any plan. So we'll invite organized labor to continue working with us in ensuring that we go through this period of emotions and this period of sensitivity around everything, including health itself. And therefore, we're saying together with them and under DGs, we should be able to work through all of these matters and measures to mitigate against any perception that might prevail out there in relation to fairness. We want to acknowledge that we are in a period where quite a number of public servants will be required to work, nevertheless work from home. And we want to say to them, you will continue waking up in the morning, and you will continue taking up your necessary gadgets and equipment provided to you by your departments, and be available to render or to continue with your work. When you are called, you must always remember you are at work. When you are required to make submissions to your superiors and your supervisors at specified times, you will be expected to do so. And you will be required, therefore, to be in constant communication with your supervisors and those over whom you are responsible, to make sure that the government is able to render those services that are required as essential. Over and above that, we want to put emphasis as public service on internal government business issues or business-related issues. These relate to matters of ensuring that at the end of the month, all public servants are paid duly, and that preparations to pay them the next round is also prepared, well prepared for. And this requires, therefore, that those that work in corporate sections of all our departments, they don't necessarily or unnecessarily cause breakups in government business, but they continue to ensure smooth running of government in relation to that, including some HR services, some budget-related services. We want to join our President Ramaphosa, in thanking, as he did, all public service across the country for their continued understanding and loyalty to government, and the understanding that we have a duty to the citizens of our republic. And even in these trying times, including trying times in your own health as a public servant, you are still being called upon to actually heed the call and render the services that you are required to render, including those that will be identified or are being identified to remain on duty and render essential and critical services. We say thank you very much to all of them, and we will continue supporting them. And the DGs and HODs across are required to do so. And my last reminder is to say, in particular, DGs are at work. Ministers are not going to work alone, and they're not going to run around without the necessary support from DGs and from all other staff that has been identified. Which days DGs will be working from home and from work, from the place of work, we leave that to our colleagues in various ministries, in provinces and nationally. Safe to say, DGs in particular are required to lead from the front. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Mkono. We proceed, we request Minister Nyambos Mthethwa to come and speak to the nation. You know, Minister Mthethwa is responsible for arts, culture, and sports. Nyambos.
Thank you so much, my colleague, Minister Mthembu. Good afternoon to everyone, members of the media and my colleagues here with me. Allow me, Program Director, before I proceed with the business of the day, to pay tribute and salute the fallen father of indigenous knowledge in this country, Baba Ukredo Mutwa, Isanusi. May his soul rest in eternal peace. The President of the Republic, His Excellency President Ramaphosa, in his address to the nation on the 15th of March 2020, declared the spread of coronavirus a national disaster. This declaration necessitated the implementation of measures to mitigate the challenges. Amongst the measures announced by the President was to limit gatherings to less than 100 people. This necessary measure was a fatal blow to the sector, since it depends on numbers for it to survive, be it the gigs, its concerts, festivals, sporting matches, and so on. We made a point at the time, and we are reiterating now, that the sporting and creative sectors are going to be the hardest hit by these critically important measures. I can't think of any sector which needs support and solidarity of all South Africans across the board to ensure that in these insane times we preserve our sanity than the sector of sporting and creative. Subsequent to the address by the President, we convened sectoral meetings and a number of issues were discussed and suggestions made on how to mitigate the impact of this pandemic. On the sporting front, for instance, they shared with us actions that they've already taken to respond positively to the call by the President even before he made the call. This includes, amongst others, the postponements, cancellation of matches. In the final analysis, the sporting fraternity made suggestions on how to address the challenges brought by the outbreak of COVID-19. The cultural and creative sector remains in desperate situation as a result of the declaration. They've made suggestions on how to deal with the situation. And these are the following suggestions. One, that we all explore the utilization of the fourth industrial revolution on live performances with no audiences, the live streaming. Also suggested that we engage the private sector, especially the financial services sector, for the relief they sorely need on such things as house and car mortgages, rents, and other installments. They also wanted government to give direction on athletes who are trapped abroad in countries of Europe, across Europe, and the US. We also were asked to engage our sister Department of Communications to avail platforms for key individuals in the sector to send messages of hope and awareness on coronavirus, emphasizing on indigenous languages. And also to ensure that the public broadcaster is biased in favor of local content, especially during this time. This will go a long way in alleviating the plight of artists and athletes. In this meeting, we also had the presence of organized formations in the sector, such as the national federations, all the national federations in sport, and the Confederation, SASCOC. On the side of the cultural and creative sector, we had Federation of Creatives, the Creative and Cultural Industries Federation of South Africa, known as CIFSA. We also had, and we thought it was important that we bring in collecting societies, the likes of SAMBRO, of IMBRA, of SAMBRA, of CAPASO, who all have made commitments to play their part. I must, ladies and gentlemen, say here that the one CAPASO for composers, authors, publishers have already made a concrete suggestion that instead of waiting for people to get their royalties around June or September, they are prepared to do that during this coming month, which is April. And they would make a plea to all of them to follow suit to ensure that we really assist the sector. These are people who depend on all of us to come to their shows, but more than just attending their shows. These are human treasures, people who are able to navigate difficult circumstances, make us feel better as humanity. So the assistance and solidarity for them will be requested across the board, public sector, collecting societies, private sector, everyone else who are making a call that let us ensure that those who make the nation to be what it is, to be very close to its soul, to be very close to its identity, are assisted. So all these suggestions meant one thing. They boiled down to a question of the need for resources. So we had to look around as the department and see what is it that we can secure to ensure that we made our humble contribution in the attempt to mitigate and soften the impact of this pandemic we're faced with. We have redirected the allocation at the national level to avail 150 million rands to provide the much needed relief to practitioners in the sector. We've also engaged our colleagues, the MECs in provinces, that we need to find a way of topping up what we have so that we give that hand to our creatives, particularly and athletes. I must say that as a result of what they raised with the private sector, government did engage private sector, particularly the financial services sector. And we've seen commitments from that front that we're not going to see a situation where people are chased out of their homes or flats because they couldn't secure employment this time around. And that for us, we appreciate. But we also say that broader in the private sector, let us make our contribution from different angles. So these allocated funds are the funds for the first quarter in the new financial year. And we know by now that the kind of programs were to fund during this quarter are not going to be funded because we're trapped in this pandemic. Priority will be given to artists and practitioners who were already booked by some of the cancelled and postponed events funded by the department, as well as to the legends of the industry. For the audiovisual sector, already over 25 TV productions have been postponed, possibly to be cancelled by broadcasters. About 15 live shows have been cancelled. And I must emphasize this because this is where the creatives make their living, in particular, with the live shows. The department, together with the Department of Communication, are engaging broadcasters and producers to ensure that we meet this very important sector in our society and the practitioners thereof. We also made partnerships with our playhouses around the country as spaces which are going to be utilized by the creatives for their work. And part of what we have set aside is to ensure that the creatives do not pay for their utilization of the spaces, which is much more needed. We'll avail artists a platform to perform live streaming activities, which includes, amongst others, stand-up comedy, poetry session, music, and so forth. This will be done to keep people entertained, to showcase the work of the creatives, and to promote local content across all art genres. The department will commission service providers in the digital space to curate new programs in all disciplines to ensure that artists continue to do their work. The department will share details of plans on the process for participation. The National Video Foundation, the National Film, NFVF, the National Film and Video Foundation will offer immediate relief to practitioners in the film industry by prioritizing and making payments to beneficiaries that have submitted milestones in the past 2 weeks on an urgent basis. Beneficiaries who have yet to submit milestones over the next 3 months will also be paid. NFVF also intends to release a call for development, post-production, animation, and archive by the end of this week, which will ordinarily have only been released in August. The aim of this exercise is to ensure that normal processes are applied to all applications, including council approvals, by the 10th of June to keep the industry going. The foundation will further reprioritize funding earmarked for the film festivals which have been cancelled and realizing them for an early production in September 2020. As part of Slate's program, which benefits young emerging producers, the NFVF has further identified a savings of 4.5 million rands from the current fiscal, which will be used as part of the relief program. NFVF will provide a cash injection of 500,000 rands to 9 companies currently commissioned by the organization. This relief will only be contained to the slates currently commissioned by the institution and would be extended to anyone else in the industry. On the key messages, the department further calls upon both public and private broadcasters to lend a hand in the relief program towards the sector by paying more locally produced content to enable artists to earn royalties and to show patriotism towards their country. Part of the department's education and awareness program is to share messages about COVID-19, but also to communicate messages that will bring courage and hope to South African citizens that we are a resilient country and we can triumph in spite of this pandemic. Through our campaign, we will be sending out a strong message that carries many voices. This we will attain by commissioning young and upcoming artists, renowned artists, and our legends to curate via their respective social media platform. Thank you for your attention.
Enkosi Nyambos, siyabonga baba. Before we have the next speaker, we just want to sort out something, Minister. Net kancinci nje. Awuyifaki ibe enhle lento. Ufuna ukuthi ibe enhle le background. If nakube iyanhlula manje bese siyekele lento. Are we better? Thank you. we wanted to ensure that there is our branding. Now we want to see this branding so that when we take the questions, when the ministers respond to the questions, everybody must say that it's us who are responding to the questions who are part of the government of this country. So now we will get to the next speaker, who's the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, Minister Ndabeni Abrams. Minister.
Thank you, Director of the Program, Minister Mthembu. My dear colleagues and comrades, the ministers on the other side, members of the media, fellow communicators, and to all those that are watching us today. I join my colleagues in a call that has been made by President Ramaphosa to say this is high time that we work together in ensuring that we minimize the impact of COVID-19 virus. This therefore meant that as the department, we have a responsibility to make sure that, amongst other things, we get the people of South Africa to communicate. Amongst other things, it is the platform that the people of South Africa must utilize in order for them to communicate. Key to that, it is the technologies and the software that the people must utilize. Program Director, I'm happy to say, last week a group of 23 CEOs gathered together to say, as the industry, they want to help government and the people of South Africa to be able to realize what I spoke about. It is in this context that our consolidated input and response thereof to the COVID-19 virus looks to the following elements that I'll be talking to. The first one is that you know of in terms of dissemination of real-time public information. The second one is to ensure access to communications infrastructure and digital services. The third one is to provide individual tracking and tracing through the existing legislations that we must look at and the platforms thereof. The other one is to support the following key sectors of our society, being education, health, and local government. Of course, if I talk about access to communications infrastructure and digital services, it tells you already that one envisages a situation whereby there's going to be too much traffic on the network. That as a call has been made by the President for a lockdown, and Minister Mkhunu has released the public service to say, go and work from home because we need you safe. And the private sector has done so. And therefore, as government and the department, we've seen it important that we therefore help provide capability to those that are providing the networks. It is in this context that ICASA, our regulator, is considering, amongst other things, ensuring that we will provide spectrum relief to those that must therefore provide the services. As they'll be providing that relief, it has to be done in accordance with the law, taking into consideration what is it that we want to achieve, but most importantly, being able to keep track of the infrastructure that will be rolled out, so that by the time we get out of this dilemma, the spectrum goes back, if possible, failing which the regulator will determine what therefore must happen with the temporal spectrum. It is in this context again that as the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, we have seen and observed as people who are amongst others in this world, that the education system has been disrupted. And of course, ours as the people in the technology space is to say, how do we then bridge the gap that has been caused by whatever that has led to us being here? And together with the Department of Basic Education, we will be working together in order to provide both broadcast and virtual classrooms. Our children are sitting at home, they're playing cartoons, others are busy finishing food, parents are worried. And ours is to say, how do we make sure that our own students at home can be in a classroom whilst they're in their comfort at home? Which is why SABC has availed a channel that will be dedicated to education, including identifying 2 studios whereby the broadcast of the virtual classrooms will be provided. As we talk about this, we don't refer to videos that are recorded, that are going to be showcased, but an environment where we're going to have teachers live on the studio and in the virtual classrooms teaching children, that would encourage parents to make sure that they wake up and put on their uniform like they will do when in their classrooms. We're bridging the digital divide. Ladies and gentlemen, as I talk about that, a sum of about 100 million has been set aside to enable the small businesses in our sector that should be carrying out the work that I spoke about. Key to the work that we are doing is the emergence of disinformation, or what is popularly known as the fake news. And therefore, as the department, we've engaged with the platform owners to say they must quickly remove any content that will be reported fake. We are happy to say the response has been positive, and the platform owners have signed an agreement with the department. Once more, ladies and gentlemen, it is important that as we seek to overcome the challenges that we're faced with, whilst at the same time we deliver efficiently, technologies must be accessible. This therefore tells that our industry players may be looking for new equipment, and we therefore call upon our authority to make sure that there's type approval of network equipment and handset devices based on the applicants meeting predetermined criteria. Because we would not have a time whereby we're going to take 90 days to approve the equipment whilst you are saying people must get the services. But it's important that the authority follows all the processes within the short time without fail. Of course, it is important that in order to minimize the spread of the virus, as much as we have traced the trends of how far is the virus, but it's important also to look at the individuals that are affected in order to be able to help the Department of Health to say we know that in a particular area we have so many people that are infected. And that can only be enabled when we work together with the Department of Health and the operators that have capability to do so. The industry collectively has agreed to provide data analytics services in order to help government achieve this that we're talking about. It is important again that through our licensees on the audiovisual services, that they must all make sure that they broadcast messages that talk to the health education of COVID-19 pandemic. As we talk about that, we will see the telecoms companies also sending messages. You've seen already Vodacom stay home or stay safe. Already they've shown that. You've seen Telkom, who pledged 15 million towards the work that must be done by the Department of Health. We are expecting more pledges as the mobile operators and the industry players continue to engage in the specific services that they want to be involved in. Of course, through our agencies, USASA, through the Universal Service Access Fund, we will be connecting all those virtual classrooms that I spoke about, which means we've got to increase bandwidth. At the same time, as we enable government to operate remotely wherever they are, CETA will be taking charge of that in terms of providing the equipment that must be provided, whilst our infrastructure companies, together with the SMMEs, provide the bandwidth. The South African Post Office is directed to support the efforts of the Minister of Social Development and SASSA insofar as payment of social grants, and of course in implementing measures to combat the spread of COVID-19. Amongst these is ensuring that we make sure that we stay away from each other, but be able to render the service, and therefore inclusion of digital services in the disbursement of social grants is encouraged. Because it is a very critical time, we have heard that most people want to exploit the opportunity in order to enrich themselves. We have therefore taken a decision that amongst the regulations the Minister will be gazetting, the prohibition on price increment and mobile number portability will be inserted. This is done to ensure that we can avoid scammers or minimize the impact of scammers who will be calling people to say, we request your contacts because you are porting from this number to another number, and also the mobile operators themselves to increase the cost of data. That I'm happy to report that all our operators have zero-rated not only the education content, but also all government websites, including non-profit-based organization websites, in a quest to say people must access the services of government. Fellow South Africans, South Africa is a religious country. We are faced with a weekend that is coming. People are heartbroken that they're not going to get an opportunity to be in the pulpit or do that they do best during the Easter weekend. It is in this context that together with the broadcasters, both SABC and those that are under DSTV, that we've agreed that we're going to clear some channel in order to ensure that South Africa has an Easter Sunday broadcasted and online. Google is our key partner on this one. This is meant to enable those that would have missed an opportunity to go to church, that they can have their church wherever they are, sitting in their lounges if they're watching TV in their lounges, and those that will be at work, they can utilize their devices through the platforms that are there. Engagements with the stakeholders in this regard are still ongoing. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you, but most importantly, I want to say we've called for these services that are being offered here by these gentlemen and the lady in front of me, the broadcasters that are here, our people in the print media space, to say these are essential services. As we say they are essential services, there is therefore a need for them to be at work in order to keep the country informed at all times. But as they do that, as employers, we have a responsibility to make sure that they stay safe, and therefore we have to provide equipment or tools of trade that will ensure that. Of course, there are non-core staff that we don't expect to be at work, but those that are expected to go to work will have to continue with their services in order to keep the nation informed and educated at all times. Throughout the 18 radio stations of SABC and other channels, we'll be sharing information in relation to what is it that we can do as the people of this country in order to minimize the impact of the spread of the virus. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Dabene Abrams. We have now concluded the inputs by our ministers. As tradition will demand, we will now give you the opportunity to ask questions, clarity, and for better understanding of what they would have said here. And again, I join my colleagues in thanking our people at home listening to this broadcast. We appreciate that. Now we are at question time. We'll start with number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, one last more? None. Thank you very much. We have 9 hands. Let's start with number 1.
Thank you so much. Francis Logamachate from Progressive Independent News Agency. Minister Ndabeni Abrams mentioned that one channel will be cleared to allow the broadcast of Easter message. So I want to understand how are these churches going to share that particular channel? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Number 2.
Sinatemba from Jacaranda FM News. Minister Ndabeni, my question is to you as well. Regarding the 2 channels about the virtual learning and the virtual classrooms for the tiny people, will that be available on DSTV, or will it be available for those who don't have access to that?
Number 3.
Also to Minister Ndabeni Abrams, my name is Peter de Tooy, I'm from News 24. You just spoke of the media as essential services. What is the specific arrangements around that in regards to movement of media? Who is included in this as part of the media as essential services? And what identification the media would need to move around the country in order, like you said, to document events around the country? Thank you.
Number 4.
Antoinette Slabbert from Media 24. Also for Minister Ndabeni Abrams, following up on my colleague Peter's question, with regards to the media, will there also be provision for production staff? It's not only journalists who have to gather the news, but also the staff that assist in disseminating the news. The sound engineers, the graphic artists, even the distribution staff in the case of print. Can you please just put our minds at ease about those staff, because without them, there's no sense in gathering the news if we cannot disseminate it.
Hi, this is...
5. Next. Yeah.
Hi, this is Nombelo Chalambera from News 24. This is to Minister Abrams. I wanted to find out, in terms of the virtual learning, will there be provisions made to those who don't have any access to sort of any TV? What provisions for kids that don't have access? And when will you start rolling out these virtual classrooms?
6.
Vickers Burger from Media 24 as well. It's also relevant to or connected to some of the questions. I'm just following up on that as well. Is to add on with what my colleague said about the media and the movement of the media. Those that distribute news, like newspapers, publications, titles, and so forth, will they be allowed to move around? What is the restrictions or whatever with regards to them?
Next.
Good day, my name is Arissa, and I'm also here from Media 24. My question is for Minister Mthethwa. On a practical level, how will artists be able to qualify for the funds that have been made available, and how will they be able to apply for these funds? Thank you.
Next.
Sipho Stirman, Sipho Stirman from SABC TV News. This goes to Minister of Mineral Resources. Are you saying that mines that are supplying coal to Eskom will be in operation but in a reduced capacity? Now, will this affect electricity supply in the country? Will we experience a load shedding during this 21-day lockdown period? And also to Minister Stella Ndabeni, this...
Just a minute. Can we get a better mic?
Okay.
Because we can't hear you clearly.
All right. Sipho Stirman from SABC TV News. I'll just repeat that question to the Minister of Mineral Resources. You're saying that mines that are supplying coal to Eskom will still operate but on a reduced capacity. Will this then affect general power supply to the country? And should South Africans expect load shedding during this 21-day lockdown period? And to Minister Stella Ndabeni, this proposed channel that will be available for educational purposes, when is that going to come on board exactly? And I think one of the colleagues did ask, is that going to be available on both free-to-air, or is it only for DSTV purposes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. You can answer from where you are seated. Who's the first taker? Just before Minister Ndabeni answers, colleagues from Cape Town, we know that there are 4 questions from that side. When we are done with this, we will come to you. Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you, Minister Mthembu. Colleagues, on the question of the churches that we spoke about, it's a program, as I said, both by SABC and under DSTV. I'm not sure which channel, I think they said Mindset from DSTV. And it is going to be done in collaboration with the faith-based organization, and therefore the broadcasters will engage with the relevant bodies under the faith-based organizations. I've already spoken to Minister Mthethwa because he's a key stakeholder on that in terms of engaging also CRL and all those that are affected. Unfortunately, on the scheduling, I can't detail that. It is those that are involved, but all we would like to see is that normally you would see when they go to F&B and they've called all the churches together and all of them, they get to share the stage, and our people can therefore be able to have the services that they are looking for. So it's both SABC, which is a public broadcaster, and of course, the DSTV channel that I spoke about. On the broadcasting and virtual channels that we spoke about on education, again, those are available from the two broadcasters that I spoke about. SABC has its own dedicated channel, and DSTV has done so. And yes, the services are available to all those that will have access to TV and some that will have access to their devices. As part of the digital migration program in the department, we've decided again to make sure that we fast track the process of introducing the IDTV or providing the IDTV sets to the households which are beneficiaries of the DTT program, but who have matriculants and grade 9 students in their houses. That will be the priority. So we're killing two birds with one stone to say we're fast tracking the progress on digital migration while still providing education through the platform that we have from SABC and others. On media being the essential services, how are people going to know that these are the people that are offering the essential services? Of course, the form of identification that is expected is your ID, and of course your CEO would have written a letter that you are part of those members. And of course, as I said, you all have your cards and whatever that belongs to your organization, and that will be verified, and therefore you'll be able to be given access. What about the support structure? In the print media, we have people who produce content, who collect content, who distribute content, and that has been taken into consideration because there is no need for us to say people must go gather news, and therefore after they've collected all those, the information cannot be disseminated. We're making these efforts because we understand that the people of South Africa must have access to information at all times. Those that believe in the traditional media, let them have access to the print media, let them have access to radio, TV, and any other platform that we utilize. Therefore, your companies are the ones that will be then providing that information to say these are our suppliers. And as I said, the letterheads and everything that will be done will be verified with the relevant authorities. We are also cautious of the scammers that would want to utilize this opportunity to want to claim that we're working for SABC or we're working for this department or from the licenses of the telcos to say we're coming to check your infrastructure as they want to do their things. So we'll be working hand in hand with the police in order to protect not only the field workers but the consumers themselves. Virtual learning, it was the same question. Movement, I've really responded to both identification and the movement of those that are offering the services. I will therefore hand over to my colleagues. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Nyambas.
Thank you very much, Minister Mthembu, and thanks for the question. We're still working the details of the criteria. But amongst others, we're looking at people who would be having a national and international footprint at a national level. We would leave mostly the up and coming for provinces to follow up. So we would be putting together a team of people comprising of legends and younger creatives to be the ones who are going to be presiding over the judgments on the criteria who should be on or not. Thank you so much.
Baba, Mr. Mantash.
The one question was about mines supplying Eskom with coal. What if they don't meet the demand? Will there be load shedding? I hope I heard you. Yes. You will notice that our approach is focusing on people rather than business. It is not about business deals and requirements. Supplying ESCOM with coal is a requirement. We are appreciating the fact that with the lockdown, the demand will be very low. Therefore, it is unlikely that we're going to be having load shedding, because quite a number of industrial consumers will not be producing. And therefore, electricity is going to be available more abundantly than normal. And therefore, we don't have a fear of load shedding. But we require ESCOM not to be in a situation where they cannot supply electricity to society. So, if you look at that, you can link it to the one on energy, which talks about production, distribution of petroleum products. We're not expecting you to go to a pump station and not get petroleum. The opposite will happen, is that the demand for petroleum products is going to be low, and therefore it will be available. In the sector, they are even considering looking at hours of opening pump station. We said let's analyze that depending on the demand. So with ESCOM it will be the same.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Cape Town. You know, we're using an auditorium that did not have this type of facility. Cape Town, number 1.
Good afternoon, it's Marianne Merton from the Daily Maverick. A question for Minister Mantashe, please. You indicated that mines will operate at significantly reduced levels. What provisions or what agreement has been reached with regards to mine workers? Will they be under lockdown in the mining hostels? Will they be allowed to go back home, wherever that may be? And have special transport arrangements been made, for example, for the mine workers that come to South Africa from our neighboring countries, like Lesotho, for example? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cape Town. Number 2.
Tianya Niber for Marula Media, and I'm covered by a question from my colleague. I had the same one.
Thank you very much. That's revolutionary. Number 3.
Jan de Lange from Report Newspaper, Minister. Question for Mr. Mkhuno. I'm not sure if I heard him correct. He made reference, I think, to the third leg of the wage increase. Does public service workers are in a serious dispute about the third leg of the public service wage agreement, and I think there's probably a strong possibility that they may embark on industrial action even during the lockdown. Will public service be allowed to exercise their right to strike? Can you give some update on what the situation with that dispute about the non-implementation? You gave notice that you won't implement the third leg of the wage agreement starting at the end of April. What is happening about that? Thank you.
The last one, Cape Town.
From Cape Town. That's all from Cape Town for now. Thank you.
Oh, we are done in Cape Town. Let's answer these questions. We'll come to you. Colleagues, who do we start? Minister Mantashe?
I have one. In our consultation yesterday, we talked to the industry and we talked to all the unions in the industry. And our understanding was that we are going to be managing the situation together. It is not about, you see, there's a temptation of going to the extremes, where companies will want to say we agree with lockdown but allow us to operate normally. The other extreme is that there is 21 days lockdown, it's a paid holiday. And we say no, both those extremes are not correct. The correct approach is we allow essential services to protect the future of those industries and protect the future jobs of those workers. Whether is there any agreement for mine workers, we leave that to employers and unions. But one of the intentions of a lockdown is to reduce and minimize movement. So it would be inadvisable to allow buses and buses of mine workers to go to the villages and come back, because you run a risk of actually transporting the virus from areas where there is heavy concentration to areas where there are still few incidents. And therefore, our advice to the industry was that, listen, there must be no movement of massive migration of workers from the mines to the villages. Better, they should be accommodated in the mines, provided with food, provided with medical care, provided with all the necessities in those areas. And if necessary, allow them to work different shifts alternatively in the reduced production.
Thank you very much, Minister. Next
But
one.
anyway, the majority of mine workers today don't stay in hostels. Quite a number are part of the communities around those mines.
Thank you, Minister Mkono. It's on.
Oh, it's on.
Yes.
Thank you. No, thanks for your question. For now, I think all of us in the Republic are focused, and strictly so, focused on fighting coronavirus. I think this is another effort here, over and above a very strong call by our president that we focus almost exclusively on fighting coronavirus. What I'm able to say is that organized labor share the concern about coronavirus and are contributing in the fight. I haven't heard any union or anyone making a statement to the contrary with regard to coronavirus. And we appreciate that we're all united, including organized labor, on this matter. And we don't want that to be confused with any other thing. However, on the question, which is separate, that you are talking about, you're talking about the threat and whether labor will be able to exercise their right. I think we need to park that and not dwell on any speculation and deal with the matter when you cross that particular bridge. Thank you very much.
Minister Ndabeni Abrams.
Thank you, Minister Mthembu. Our question came through Minister Mthethwa. Why must we include print media services in the essential services? Who will they be delivering to as people will be quarantined? That's the question I got. Whoever that asked the question, you want to say, the fact that people are quarantined, it doesn't mean that they must be deprived of information. And the fact that the distributors of the papers will be distributing, it doesn't mean that they hand over the papers to the people. There are post boxes that are being used where people insert these papers, and others, they drop them at the shops, and people know how to deal with those. So we are careful and cautious of all the dangers that can be posed by this that we're talking about. But at the end of the day, we remain resolute that our people must have access to information, and will adhere with all the measures that must protect the people, and will ensure that the industry itself adheres to them. Thank you so much.
Nyambo, say anything? Thank you. By the way, just to add on the categories that will be exempted. Of course, our colleagues are coming now around 4 or 5 to talk about categories that we exempted. But we know for a fact that you can't not exempt people from accessing information, as the minister has said, and people who are the conduit of information to the masses is the media. So as to what will be the rules and regulations that will apply to those that are exempted, let's allow the colleagues that are coming to brief us at 4 o'clock. They have been working on those regulations and rules. Those rules will apply to all those that will be exempted. Now, having said that, can we then take some more questions if there are any? Let's start at the back. Then the lady at the back. Then the lady with the yellow shirt, the lady here. Any other? Oh, done. So we've got 4. We have 4. Oh, 5. Thank you. Let's get started. Number 1.
Afternoon. My name is Aserin Lovu. I'm from Capital Live. I just want to quickly ask a question to Minister Mthethwa. He mentioned something about 25 productions that have been postponed and possibly cancelled, and said something like they will be paid, especially those that are booked already, including artists. I want to quickly check, what about the community media as well that has been booked for certain broadcasts that are cancelled or postponed? Are they also going to be paid? And generally, in all departments, maybe you can still answer for them, what about these companies like the catering companies that were also booked for all those events that are cancelled? Are they also going to be paid? Thank you.
Number 2. Yes. Usuku manje sikubone sisi. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Right. Hlonim Timkulu from ENCA. This is to Minister Nathi Mthethwa. You mentioned a little bit about the meeting about the athletes that were stuck overseas. Just from a sports perspective, I know this is more about arts and culture, and we're happy to do a one-on-one afterwards if possible. Can you please just specify what the plans are for those artists that aren't able to make it back at the moment, for the sports people that aren't able to make it back at the moment?
Next.
My name is Mbali Tetani from Newsroom Africa. My first question goes to Minister Mchunu. I just want to find out, when it comes to essential services, how are the essential services staff going to be protected? Will our government be giving any support to their families? And my second question goes to Minister Mthethwa. You've been seen to be in contact with the Netball SA CEO. She's tested positive for the coronavirus. Will you also be getting tested?
Next. We have said, Nangale. Thank you.
Hi, Arisa again from Media 24. My question is for Mr. Mchunu. You mentioned that essential services who need to be called out will still be working. Can you please give details on which essential services this will be? For example, if a pipe bursts and a whole community is without water, will there be someone to come and fix these pipes? Thank you.
Sipho Stilman from SABC again. It's more of a request than a question. I was asked for SABC purposes if the minister can consider just giving summaries of the speeches here for other language groups, for the other channels that we have, if it's possible at all and if time permits. Thank you.
Okay. Before the minister's answer, colleagues and fellow South Africans, all of us did not plan for this. we found ourselves in this pandemic. So we might need to work together and even, as the president normally says, fix the plane as it flies. That's what we will have to do as it relates to this matter. Yes, we will give whatever responses that we will, but we also need you, colleagues. We need you to also assist us, people of our country. We are together in this. So government alone will not come with solutions. Let's be together in finding solutions to this pandemic that has just gripped our country. With that said, I then hand over to Nyambos.
Thank you, Minister Tembo Kavatela. No, the people who are going to be prioritized are those whose concerts have been cancelled, which were to be funded by the department, and those who applied to the department. It's specific to that. With regards to community media, my colleague, Minister Davenia Abrams, is going to respond to that. The issue of the athletes stuck across the world is a difficult one because mainly it would be in those countries in Europe which are been identified by the World Health Organization as high risk countries, as it were. And as you know, that when the president made an announcement for the lockdown, those countries were banned to South Africa. Because if you follow the history of the infections, it has been by and large by people who are coming from different countries, as it were. So that's the situation now, because the call was not only coming from Europe, it was a lot of countries across the board. Resource-wise, it was going to be impossible for the government to ensure that people, one person in one country, in more than 100 countries, to repatriate or evacuate them to South Africa. It's not the CEO of Netball, it's the president of Netball. She was in a meeting where we were. The team came from NICD to check. No, there was no contact with her from my side. So I'm fine. I forgot to ask the question. I'm okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Davena Abrams.
Thank you, Minister Mthembu. Just to respond to the first question that Minister Mthethwa referred to me. As the department, we have decided through Centec that in order to minimize the negative impact to the community media, or those that have had their bookings cancelled, we're gonna extend grace to say we're not gonna charge them for the signal distribution. So as much as they would have lost money in the events that were booked for, but still we are exempting them from payment until COVID-19 is over. Actually, for a period of 90 days, they will not be paying Centec. So all community broadcasters have to broadcast and provide information to all people without fear that they will be switched off, and because they've lost some money, that has been taken care of by the same government. There was a question again on essential services. Minister Mthembu did say probably let's allow the Ministers of Justice and Crime Prevention Cluster to come and detail more, but to be specific to those that have been identified as essential services, I did say the CEOs will take responsibility, which therefore means that the respective ministers, together with the CEOs of their industries, will therefore have engagements and the information will be shared. Unfortunately, for now, it is the details that we do not have, as we entirely rely on that will be announced this afternoon, and the collaboration between the CEOs or owners of the companies or employers with government. Then that information will be made public. I did warn again that there will be others that would want to exploit this opportunity. So it is also in your interest to make sure that people don't come and claim to be yourselves in order for them to access the areas they're not supposed to access. Therefore, the information will be directly given to yourselves as the people that will be involved in the essential services. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Minister Mkunu.
Thank you very much. Let me just say, after the declaration by the President, we have sought to look for a fitting definition of what is essential. And in our view, having tried our best to interpret this as correctly as possible, is those services that do not qualify to be restricted under the orders as directed by the President because of their nature and their link in supporting life and supporting the very fight that we're undertaking. Now, it's going to be extremely difficult for me to give you, because rather point you to the website that I hope they've already publicized them. I have them here. There are 5 pages, because we tried to be as detailed as possible, working with all other departments. But just to give you a sense, they have to do with water and sanitation, regarded as very, very, very essential. Have to do with health services, delivery of health services, even directly in relation to the fight. Defense in terms of their support in assisting where they need to assist in enforcing. Treasury in terms of ensuring that amid all these public servants themselves do get paid and resolve problems wherever there are problems in relation to payments. Minerals and energy, Minister Mantashe was talking about them here. Transport. So it's quite a range of issues across public service that would qualify to be unrestricted in the middle of restrictions that have been called upon generally on all of those. I'm trying to do my best to respond to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Mantashe. Oh, no question. Don't want to add anything. Good. Colleagues, that then brings us to the end of this interaction. As we had announced yesterday and earlier today, we'll have another engagement with the Ministers of Justice, Defense, COGTA, Police, Transport, and of course, Intelligence, SSA, and again, we'll bring again the Minister of DTI and Competition, Minister Patel. So we'll have those ministers who will come to again speak to us. How do we enforce the lockdown? That That will be their brief as they come to speak to us this afternoon. We have been requested, I know that we had said to the media and the people of our country that we will take that media briefing at 4 o'clock. We are then requesting your indulgence that we take it at 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, because there are quite many areas that need to be finalized for us to do justice to what we will say to the nation this afternoon. So we are not saying tomorrow at 5. We are saying today, just a delay of an hour from what we had said initially. With that said, to my colleagues, Minister Nyambos, Minister Ndabeni Abrams, Minister Mkono, Minister Mantashe, thank you very much. This media briefing is adjourned. Thank you.
Enkosi.
Enkosi. Yeah.